Good morning. Welcome to this edition of the Lynne Hayes Freeland Show. Well, yes, we here at KDKA are practicing social distancing. So I am in the studio all by myself. But because of one woman, Jackie Barbour, we have a great show for you today. Jacqueline Barbour reached out to me and said, hey, Lynn, I have an interview that you did with my dad, George Barbour, 30 years ago. I started scratching my head. Why would she have this interview? But it turns out I interviewed the illustrious George Barbour on the 25th anniversary on the march from Selma to Montgomery. Now, you may recall the country celebrated the 55th anniversary of that march just a few years ago. So Jackie brought that interview to me, and I figured it was a great time to remember what George Barbour, the first African-American reporter at KDKA Radio, did. The interview the two of us did when he reflected on the 25th anniversary of that march. So here is that interview. The first thing I asked him at that time was, did he wish he had been a part of the 25th anniversary? And yes, it was 30 years ago, so I look just a little bit different. Take a listen.
I would like to be there in order to relive that historic march. It was historic indeed. And to me, Selma was indeed a point that indicated that our country was indeed going to move towards a road to democracy because of the voting rights. It was just, I just thank the good Lord I was able to cover that, to have the opportunity to cover. I mention that because I, being a civil rights advocate at heart and being a professional broadcast journalist, news person, I felt as though that I could not go out and actively campaign, but I could, by reporting accurately what was happening, I could do my bit and sacrificing myself on the line in case, and it was a sacrifice indeed. I like to point out here, Lynn, that in order to get the opportunity to go, I always pride myself on being having black Yankee ingenuity, being able to accomplish things that seemingly were impossible to accomplish. When it came up concerning the march, KDK was not going to send anybody to cover. And so I approached Jack Williams, who was then the general manager, the program director of KDKA Radio. And so
And this is you at the march. We're sitting right now.
That is me at the march.
Okay.
Yes, that's me at the march, and that's on the first day of the march.
Okay.
The Sunday that we shoved out from Selma. And over to the left, you'll see a village. And this was a village that I dashed over to make a report back to KDKA Radio. I tried all along the way to get a report in, but the redneck said, no, you're not going to make a report here. I was able to find a black village at that time, a little hamlet, and I ran up as far as I could into the line of marchers who were escorted by federal troops and nationalized guards, and I dashed across to the village, and I asked if I could use a telephone there, and certainly it was welcome. And I said to Bill Steinbach, who was on radio at that time, and this was a Sunday afternoon, and I said to Bill, I can only give you a 30-second or a minute report, and because I have to get back in the line, and I'll probably be killed if I don't get there where the guards are and where the troops are. And Bill said, look, you remember how you got to go? You told us, in order to convince Jack Williams, you said that every job had its occupational hazard. And you pointed out about a policeman, a fireman, a coal miner, and a news reporter, and you, a black news reporter, that's an occupational hazard too, and that's the reason why he sent you. And he said, since it's an occupational hazard, this is the greatest story in the world right now, and you're going to have to give me more. You're going to give me more than 30 seconds or a minute and 10. So Bill and I talked, and we talked. And the more we talked, that reporter came out, that reporter aspect of me came out, and I was talking about what was happening, all the people, the different people, what have you. And finally, I realized we had been talking for about 50 minutes. And I said, Bill, I'm going. I have to get out there. And so I dashed out, I went with my pack. I had a bed pack and the whole old Ure tape recorders, dashed out to the village, down the moat, up the other side of the moat, out on the road. And at that time, all the people were dispersing. And I could see the marchers nowhere in sight. And I was determined that I was going to get back to my job, the assignment. I turned down the road and started running, and perhaps it was because of the shock of seeing this black man loaded down with all kind of equipment, with 2 tape recorders and what have you, that shocked the rednecks in such a way that I was able to get a little advantage on them in running down the road. And finally I heard somebody said, there's one of them. He's alone. Let's get him. And so the race began with me out front and quite a number of rednecks behind. And I let them know as I was running down the road, I was turning around and letting them know that I am not one of the nonviolent kind. If somebody gets me, whoever it is, somebody's going to go down with me. And lo and behold, I guess I was traveling pretty fast. I used to be a good football player. I was going pretty good, I guess. And lo and behold, almost like Hollywood, I saw around the curve in the road, the backs of the troops, the bayonets and so forth. And it was a happy sight, and I hit that line like Jim Brown, went right through it. So I was, but I was able to get the reports in, and it was that was the first of a number of incidents in which...
Okay, I'm going to have you talk through those, but you mentioned so many things I want to pick up on. Let's go back to you as a black reporter in 1965. How rare was that in terms of the coverage of the Selma March?
That was very rare, indeed. With exception of Ebony Magazine, and with, I think it was Haynes from the Washington Post. Those were about the only black reporters there, yes.
How did your being black affect the stories that you sent back?
The stories I sent back were reports. I could take a fish-eyed look at the reports, at what was happening. For instance, I recall one marcher, and she obviously was up in age, and I had to talk with her. And I asked her the simple question, says, why are you marching? And she, at that time, she was in her bare feet. I know she was struggling. And she said, you know, I'm 72 years of age, and I'm not going to be here much longer. I'm marching for a better day for my children and my children's children. God bless her. I'll never forget her. And so, so far as the reports, I was able to focus in on the people.
On those kinds of
stories.
stories.
And also talk about the deacon, Jim Clark, the sheriff, as we went by his church where he was a deacon.
We got to take a break.
I'm telling you, George Barbour was the best storyteller, and what a treasure his daughter unveiled for us. We'll have more coming up in just a minute. Don't go away.